welcome back, everybody. Again, I hope you're getting a taste of both planners that you can spend a little bit more time on when you are back home doing it in with your church context. Want to, again, to pull us back to the Learner's Guide so that we can head into this session on mobilizing your groups from sitting to serving. Now, although we're going to talk about, volunteering, almost all of these points are applicable for you both on the church level and inside of your small group. So how do you get people from just sitting in your group to actually learning their giftedness and taking it to the next level? Let's look at point number one. And as I'm starting this in our paradigm, when we're talking about ministry and evangelism, ministry is more believer to believer oriented. Evangelism is more believer to unbeliever. So almost everything we're going to be talking in this point is related to believer to believer. So number one, cultivate people with a heart and belief for service. John 13 is a familiar passage, but it says, "So when he got up from the table, he took off his robe, he wrapped a towel around his waist, and he poured water into a basin. Then he began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that he had around him." Now, this is a common biblical story when Jesus washes the feet of the disciple. And when you look at first century culture, you realize that the common practice of the day was the most least amongst people, or the servants would wash the feet of people when they came in. And what we see on this is, again, another paradox change where Jesus is, washing their feet. And this is so true on service that you want to be able to looking for people who have a heart and a belief for being able to minister to people. At my one of the churches I was on staff at, there was one of my small group leaders, and he was kind of like a slender built, a little bit of a scruffy beard, but he was faithful, and he led our groups. He led his group very, very faithfully. And I can remember, I'd see him all the time, and one of the things he and his small group would do is they would pick up the trash after the services. They'd go through the auditorium and they'd pick up the trash. It was interesting that one of my pastimes is I would read LA Magazine. And LA Magazine periodically would do the top 10 highest paid executives in Los Angeles County. And I can remember this, and this is some 16, 17 years ago. I can remember reading this, and I was reading through the top 10 people, and I was noticing that the third person who made, at that particular time, he made $7.2 million that year. But it was interesting. I was going, oh, that's interesting. This person's name is the exact same name as my group leader that picks up the trash after church, and spells it the same way. And I thought, well, isn't that weird? But I soon learned that the guy on that top 10 paid executives was my small group leader. And he quickly became my new best friend. Yes, but not as maliciously as I'm saying. But the interesting thing was, I can remember talking to Denny after service one day, and I said, hey, couldn't help but notice your name on this magazine feature article. And he goes, I hate it when they print that. I feel like my privacy is invaded and all that. And I went to him and I said, do you tithe? No, I didn't say that. But I went to him and I said, why do you pick up the trash? I go, you can employ our whole facilities team. And it was very interesting because at that time we were meeting in a warehouse, and he took me up to the warehouse and he said, do you see this chair? And I go, yeah, it's like the other 200 chairs up in this part of this balcony area. And he goes, this is the chair that I received Christ at and became a completed Jew. And he said, from that day forward, I said, there is nothing in God's house. I mean, there's nothing in my house that I wouldn't do for God's house. And so he says, it's an honor to clean up God's house. And I thought to myself, and it changed my disposition forever from that conversation, because there wasn't a moment that when I'm on any one of the church campuses that I live at, that I don't stoop down to pick up trash, because if there's trash in my house, I'd pick it up. If there's trash in God's house, I'd pick it up. And the thing is that Denny cultivated a heart and a belief for service. Look at that call out right there. It says, you will never arrive at a state in life where you're too important to help with the menial task. It's a vital part of your character curriculum. Isn't that so true? Isn't that so true? Because it is. Sometimes we think, that is just way beneath me. But God is working on our character. Look at some of these points right here, because it's important to see. There are some things you do in a group not because you are gifted, but because you are part of the family. Now remember, the Bible is written on a family system. In a family, there's things you do things because you're gifted, but there's things you do just to run the family. I can remember when my daughter Erica went through the equivalent of the SHAPE curriculum, and it was after dinner, and I said, honey, can you take out the trash? And she goes, hey, Dad, that's not my shape. And I thought, cute. Want to see the shape of my hand on your booty? But bad parenting techniques is why this is not a parenting curriculum. But I said, honey, very cute, but it may not be where you're gifted, but I have taught that class many times, and there's things you do because you're gifted, and there's things because you do to make the family run. This is part of making the family run. Now, if you don't want to be grounded and learn another part of our family system, I would recommend taking out the trash. And so, but it's that part where we got to learn that, our job in the family system is to make the family run, is to make the family happen, and to serve them and to be with them. Now, look at some of these points on how you cultivate people for a heart for service. One is you model servanthood personally. You model servanthood personally. I was in a meeting one time, and it was one where I picked up the cell phone, and it was kind of loud, and I was sitting next to a buddy of mine named David, and he could hear my wife just, when I said hello, because I was in the meeting trying to be a little sneakish, I just go, hello, and she goes, hey, the dryer's broke, and I could just tell it was one of those moments where she was not having a good day. So I kind of snuck out of the meeting, and she was telling me the dryer was broke, and I could hear my kids in the background exercising their fallen nature. And it was just, a lot of ugly. And when I talked to her, I found out that, it wasn't so much that the dryer broke. And the dryer did break. But it was just the whole events of the day that just fried her out. And so I just said, honey, as soon as I'm done with this meeting, if we have to buy a new dryer, we'll do it. So I went back into the meeting, and I sat down, and I sat next to David, and he said, hey, I heard you had a dryer problem. And I go, and I did what a typical guy does, and I go, yeah, I do, but I'm going to take care of it. And he goes, why don't you let me help you? And I go, no, I'll take care of it. And he goes, we're in group together. Why don't you let me help you? And I go, because I'm going to take care of it. And he goes, I need to help you. And I go, why do you need to help me? He goes, because I have a spare dryer in my garage. And I went, wow. To be honest with you, I could use the help. So after our management meeting, he went to his house. He picked up his dryer out of his garage. He drove to my house to bring the new dryer. And he found out he had a gas dryer. I had an electric dryer. Then he had to go to a home improvement store and get the adapter to hook up a gas dryer. Came back to my house, hooked up our dryer, hooked it up the right way, so we now have a gas dryer, not an electric dryer. And then he took our old dryer to the dump. Now, Did he serve my family? Did he model servanthood? You bet he did. The next day I called him up and I go, hey, the refrigerator's on the blink. No, didn't do that, but it was one of those things where I just called him up and said, dude, thank you so much. Thank you. But you model it. Another point is you mention opportunities to serve. One of the things that Barna did a research project on, he said, more people are willing to serve in your church. The problem is they don't know the things that are available for them to do. And part of what you've got to be able to do is in your church is you've got to have opportunities and mention opportunities for people to serve. Because people are excited to serve, you just got to be able to tell them. And then you want to motivate people to service by your encouragement and your challenge. And that's part of where each one of us, we have to be able to help push people because none of us have enough time. None of us have enough time to serve people. But I can guarantee you this, when you serve people, you walk away thanking God you took the time to serve and minister to them. Number 2, challenge people to discover and develop their God-given shape for ministry. Challenge people to discover and develop their God-given shape for ministry. Galatians 6 says, make careful exploration of who you are and the work you have been given, and then sink yourself into that. Don't be impressed with yourself. Don't compare yourself with others. You see, part of doing ministry is being able to, find out what is it that you're good at. Everybody is a 10 in something. Look at that call out at the bottom. It says, your shape or your gifting reveals your ministry, but your servant's heart reveals your maturity. Do you understand how discipleship and ministry are starting to go hand in hand? Because mature people sacrifice and serve for others. You'll see an acrostic right there on how we help people to discover their shape. We have, it's an acrostic, and it's basically shape, and it stands for your spiritual gifts. So what's your spiritual gifts? Where's your heart? Where's your abilities? What's your personality type? And what experiences have you gone through, both positive and negative? Those things wrap up to make your shape. Now, we have a class system, Class 301, that helps you to discover that. So if you want to teach it in a class format, you can. We also have it in a small group curricula so that your whole small group can go through a curriculum on your shape. The point is, you want to help encourage your people to take those next steps. You want to help encourage your people to understand where God has got them. And even if you're in a pinch, you can do this thing that we love to call is like a hot seat exercise. And basically what we're saying is you can set a chair in the room, and it sounds a little goofy, but trust me, it can be very powerful. You set a chair in the middle of the room, and then you have everybody in the group say what they think that person would be good at. Because sometimes the people around you know more about you than you do yourself. Again, look at this call out right here. It says, one of the most life-changing gifts you can give people is the discovery of their sweet spot in ministry. And again, this is helping people become a 10 in something. Look at the scriptures there. 1 Peter 4:10, it says, God has given gifts to each of you from His great variety of spiritual gifts. Manage them well. Now you might want to circle that phrase, underline that phrase, so that God's generosity can flow through you. You want God's generosity to flow through you? Use your gifting to where God has designed you. It doesn't matter what the gifting is. All God is saying is, if you manage it well, my generosity will flow through you. Mark chapter 10 says, whoever wants to be great must become a servant. And part of one of the greatest, again, discipleship things you can do is understand how you can serve. Number 3, challenge everyone into the group to shared ownership. To shared ownership. Now, if you've ever seen a basketball game, or more importantly, if you've played basketball before, if somebody brings the ball in, dribbles all the way down the court, dribbles all the way around, and takes the shot, and does that a lot, you call them a ball hog, because it's all about them. And in the same way, you want to start to be able to look at yourself and saying, are you being a ministry hog? You want to help give people roles and opportunities. Hebrews 10:24 says, let us not consider, and let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Circle the word spur there, because you need to sometimes kind of spur people on to doing something in your group. Now, at Saddleback, we always frame this up in ways that are developmental. But some of the roles that we can have in group kind of help people frame it up in worship and fellowship, discipleship, ministry, and evangelism. And there's people in your group will always gravitate towards one of these five. There's people that love fellowship. They're the party animals. They're the event planner type people. There are people that are about discipleship, helping people learn their spiritual next steps or take that next step. There are people that are more about serving, and they're about social action and helping people out. There's people that have a bent towards evangelism, either global and local or just personally helping people find Christ. And there's also people that love worship. They love to have those experiences of being with God, and they'll take your group to new places. Again, when you find people where they're at, we have all kinds of resources that can help people discover and take next steps in their group. You see, your job is to build people, not just lead a meeting. I want you to be strategic. Now, another thing you can do in helping people develop is just rotate leadership. The beautiful thing about using DVD curriculum is that anybody can lead the group. You really only need to be able to push play and to be able to ask questions that are written down in the book. So part of what you want to be able to do is give people just this fair opportunity to be able to, lead the group. Sometimes the worst thing you can do is give people advance notice, because they're just going to worry and they're going to sweat about it. So maybe for some people, it's just the night of the group and saying, hey, I've kind of circled 3 questions for you. Could you lead the group? Again, all you want to do is get people taking a step. Now, the question is, how do I get people taking the step? Look at number 4. You want to champion opportunities for service that are developmentally appropriate. You want to champion opportunities for service that are developmentally appropriate. Now, what do we mean by that? If you look at the diagram right there, it's a simple thing. We think in crawl, walk, run. We think in crawl, walk, run steps. It's developmental. Now, for some of the people in your church leadership or in your church membership, you may want to add another step called slither. I don't know. It's totally up to you, but just kidding. But anyways, you want to think developmentally. You would never yell at a child that is an infant who's just learning to crawl when they can't perform the crawl well, or when they're just learning to walk if they fall down. One of the common mistakes we do in church life is we ask people to run long before we've asked them to walk or to crawl. So part of what you want to be able to do is you want to help people that are developmentally appropriate. Now, when you think of this, there's a common rule in church life. It's called the 80-20 principle. And that is that 80% of what gets done happens from 20% of the people. So now this happens for one of 2 reasons. One is because the 20% tend to be highly dysfunctional. They say yes to everything. And I know some of you are pastors are saying, I can't believe you said that. Don't say that, because they're running my church. And I agree. They are running the church. They're great servants. They're serving, and they give above and beyond. But what we do need to teach them is a simple word called no. Let me give you an example. If if I was standing next to somebody who was shy but had giftedness, and I'm one that always says yes all the time, what can happen is that when the pastor asks me to do something, anything, hey, can somebody help in the parking lot? I jump in and say, hey, I can do it. And the person gets lost behind me. Or he says, hey, we need somebody to help count money. Oh, I can do it. And the point is, whether you can do it or not, the point is that if you say yes all the time, the Holy Spirit doesn't have time to work on other people to get into the game. And I get, some of us are going, well, if I don't volunteer, it won't happen. But sometimes the best thing that can happen in a church is if something doesn't happen, because then you find out if it's critically valued. So now, before you throw me out, let me just give you this. 20% people that are doing 80%, you still got to do it till you shine light on the 80% of the people that aren't participating. And that's the beauty of small groups. In small groups, relationally, you can get people into the game. Relationally, you can help them take a next step. Relationally, you can help them blossom so that then when they're helping in the church, it's not their first time. That's the beauty of community. Now, let me give you an example of how this shouldn't work. 7 or 8 years ago, when we were starting our first regional campus in San Clemente, me and another pastor, we flew from Orange County, California, or from Lake Forest, which is where the church is located. We flew from Lake Forest, California, to Dallas, Texas, to go to this conference to learn on how to do these regional sites a little bit better, because some churches were more up to speed than us. At this conference, me and this other pastor, we realized that some of the technology that we needed to use at the time was, that would be better for us. We just learned that we should use some satellite or some type of technical stuff. And what was interesting is that when we were at this conference in Dallas, Texas, they referred us to a church in Oklahoma City. And the great thing is that then we're like, well, at least we're getting answers. So then we connected with this church from Oklahoma City. Now I want you to follow this traffic pattern. We started in Lake Forest, California. We went to a conference in Dallas, Texas to learn that technology that we needed was a church in Oklahoma City would know. So connected up with these people in Oklahoma City, and they said, oh, great, you're going down the right tracks. This is what we do. Here's the technology, and here's the vendor that we use. And we looked at the card, and the guy's business was in Lake Forest, California. But wait, there's more. We thought, wouldn't it be funny if this person was a member of Saddleback Church? And sure enough, we went up on our database and looked, and he was a member of Saddleback Church. But wait, there's still more. He'd been in a group for 3 years. Now, that's how you don't do stewardship well. How you do stewardship well is when the group leader would have shined light on this person so we didn't have to go to Dallas, Texas to learn about this place in Oklahoma City that told us the person was sitting in one of our small groups. My point is that there is all kinds of people sitting in your church that you have no idea the talents that they're capable of. And your job is to get your group leaders to shine light on them. Another part of that, if you look at this next diagram, is once you start to understand the concept of crawl, walk, run, you've got to understand this principle of leadership development. And this is a principle that I actually learned with my daughter. And it was one of those times where we were actually on the cul-de-sac, and I was herding up some kids, and we were going to play a game of charades. And she came up to me and she goes, hey, Dad, give me an easy one. Now, why did she want an easy one? Well, because she was scared. And the thing that I would say to you that is true in this example that I want you to pick out is that whenever you have an opportunity, I don't care if the opportunity is playing charades, or the opportunity is doing something in your small group, or the opportunity is doing something in your church. Whenever you have any opportunity, you're going to gravitate to one or two places. You're going to gravitate towards fear, or you're going to gravitate towards taking a risk. Jesus wants you to take a risk. The devil wants you to get paralyzed by fear. Now, when you take a risk, if the risk is developmental, crawl, walk, or run, compared to where you are at, so that your risk is successful, then you will build your faith. And when you build your faith, when the next opportunity comes along, you're more likely to take the risk than be paralyzed by fear. Now, look at the life of David. What was David's first opportunity in 1 Samuel 17? It was to tend sheep. He took the risk, he tended the sheep, built his faith. What's the next thing that comes around in 1 Samuel 17? There's a bear that comes in. He takes the risk, he kills the bear, it builds his faith. What's the next opportunity that comes along? A lion. A lion comes in, he kills the lion, it builds his faith. What's the next opportunity that comes along? One we're probably more familiar with. Goliath. Goliath comes along. It is no wonder that from what David had gone through before, there was no wonder with his faith, he knew he could take him. So he took the risk. He kills Goliath. He's a teenager, so he cuts his head off, and it builds his faith. And what's the next opportunity Scripture tells us? Psalm 78, 70 through 72. It's when God moved David from tending sheep to tending the nation of Israel. That is the power of risk management of crawl, walk, run. Because when you can manage risk for every one of your people, and even in your family, this is why it's a family system, you'll build their faith and builds their confidence so that when the next opportunity comes, if you look at your life close enough, you're going to see the exact same things happen in you. That God took you on a crawl, walk, run development where you had risk, they built your faith so that you would be more faithful in taking those next opportunities. Look at this quote from this Harvard political scientist. He says, Rick Warren didn't invent the cellular church, but he brought it to an amazing level of effectiveness. The real job of running Saddleback is in the recruitment and training and retention of thousands of volunteer leaders for the small groups it has. That is the power of volunteerism and the power of people being able to believe in themselves. Number 5. Moving your people, mobilizing your groups from sitting to serving. Number 5 is you want to create opportunities for service. So you got to create opportunities and options for people to serve. They got to know what is available. Ephesians 4 says, equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. Your job as church leadership is to equip the saints. So what's the saints' job or the members' job? To do the ministry. Your job is to equip them so they can do it. Now look at some of these bullet points. You want to look for group serving opportunities. Part of what you want to be able to do is be able to design opportunities that are basically crawl, walk, run, so that groups can do them. Another thing is you want to review roles and responsibilities in your own group. Start to look at your own group and to say, okay, how could I create opportunities for service to happen in my own small group? Maybe it's helping out somebody in your group. Maybe somebody has elderly parents that they're just exhausted with helping. Maybe you have young kids and you need to give people respite for that. Maybe someone's going on vacation, you want to take care of their pets. There's many things that you can do to bring service to your group. Another thing is you can do brainstorming things like what would make our group better, or leave it to the group. Help the group decide how we could serve better. Let them own it. Maybe they'll have far better ideas than you ever would. Your church could have a church-wide ministry fair saying, here are all the ministries we have. Periodically, at least once a year, Pastor Rick will, highlight certain ministries so that our people can get involved. Some of them are crawl entry level so that anybody could do it. Other ones take more skill sets. But again, we want to make people available so that they can know what to serve. And even in your own small group, occasionally, don't do your Bible study that night, but free up time so that your group can go do a ministry project. Listen to what this Princeton sociologist says. It says, small groups are networks. They create bonds among people, expose people to needs, provide opportunities for volunteering, and put people in harm's way of being asked to volunteer. That's not to say that being there for worship is not important. But even in earlier research, I was finding that if people say all the right things about being a believer, but aren't involved in any kind of physical, social setting that generates interaction, they are not as likely to volunteer. Time and time again, medical science, sociologists, doctors, anything, they prove biblical principles are true time and time again. Number 6, and this is kind of an important one right here. I know you're right winding down on this session, but this is an important point. I want you to get it. Celebrate servanthood. Celebrate servanthood. In churches, we tend to be great at recruiters and recruiting people to do stuff, but we tend to be weak on celebrating when people have done stuff. And you need to celebrate servanthood. One of the bullet points here, take time in your group meeting for serve stories. Find out in your group, has anybody served? Has anybody done anything that maybe none of us know about and where they're serving in the church? Take time in your group meeting to honor those who have served. So if you find out people who've done stuff in your church, honor them and say, man, this person they did an incredible job of doing such and such and such at the church. Take time in your group to affirm what they see in people's giftings. Now, this is going to be important for those of you that have people that may not be as involved in the church. So you want to make sure that everybody's gifting, everybody understands where they should volunteer in the church. And then take time to recognize even the menial tasks that people do. The bottom line is, you're filling right here, is gratitude is fuel for the fire of motivation. When you show gratitude, people get fired up. They get excited. They're like going, wow, somebody appreciates me. And part of what you want to make sure, you want to shine light on not just the people that get the limelight all the time on the stage, but shine the light on the people that are sometimes behind the scene. Look at this call out in the bottom. It says, God determines your greatness. God determines your greatness by how many people you serve, not by how many people serve you. A very powerful statement. And then the last one right here, number 7, practical suggestions for raising the value of ministry in group life. There are a number of things that we've listed. Your group can take Class 301 together. If your church offers our class system, they can do the spiritual gifts curriculum that we have, our SHAPE curriculum. You can have the group adopt and serve another group in the church. So one group can help another group. There's a lot of different things. Jump down with me from third at the bottom. Rally the group to meet the needs that arise in the group. Now, for some of us that are not very intuitive, we may miss needs that are in the group. But there are people in your group, guaranteed, that are very in tune with what's going on in the family units. And you want to appoint them to rat people out, because people are slow to raise their hand and say, I need help. So you want to help find people that basically will help the group rally around people. And then the last bullet point right there, have a discussion regarding how each person's gift can make the group stronger. You want to bring value to people, saying, let's all speak into what gifting does this person bring, and help them just to blossom inside your group. All right, so now it's time for you to turn to your church game plan and your group game plan. And again, what I want you to be able to do is I want you to be able to turn to those planner pages, and now we're going to start to fill in those columns on ministry. You're going to work on the planners, and then you're going to be able to have some ideas if you need them. So why don't you jump into your time together and work on your planners, and I'll catch you at our next session.